Okay.
I
Okay.
I believe I gave you the grammar book via the classroom, right?
The grammar
Did I
book.
or what? Yeah, the grammar workbook. Did I give you that book?
Right. I don't
Okay.
recall, but let me check the let me
I
check the
believe I
platform.
gave. No, I'll check. No worries. I think I did, but either way, it doesn't matter. If I didn't, I'll put it in there tonight. I think I did, but in any event, we're gonna work through the book together, so you don't have to do it by yourself. We're gonna go through the book together. All right. The book is designed to be confusing. Okay. And why do you think Dave designed that book to be confusing?
Well, I haven't seen it. I
Hold
wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, maybe it's not confusing. Maybe it's But it,
well, you'll see. It's not direct. It's not like a grammar book. I'm having a class right now.
maybe because grammar is confusing. Maybe because there is no correct or better way to teach grammar. Maybe in that confusion, working it out will help you develop grammar.
So yeah, all those sound like really good reasons not to make that book confusing, but the main goal is to really encourage teachers not to teach grammar.
And find a way for students to develop a correct sentence structure without the drills and the boring syntax nuances and things like that.
Every English class or every class that is spoken in English where the medium is English is a grammar class.
Right. It's just,
That's why it's important for the teacher to speak proper English, because the teacher is continuously modeling the language. You can drill grammar all you want, but if the teacher is then not practicing what is being drilled, which often is the case, the students are going to model the people what they hear, not a worksheet. Because
Gotcha.
when we teach a language, it's authentic. So the authentic is the language that the teacher is speaking. Authentic is if I'm trying to learn Arabic, authentic would be what I hear in Riyadh, which some may argue what? That's not real. The Saudi Arabic is not the real Arabic, right? Some people say, I hear that all the time. That hey, the Arabic they speak in Saudi Arabia, don't follow that Arabic. That's not good Arabic. I hear it all the time, right? But if I'm learning Arabic, I learn it in Riyadh, what Arabic am I going to speak? Right? So I can go to an Arabic class in Riyadh and it's practicing the proper Arabic. However, I'm going to speak the Arabic that I hear every day on the street, not the one that I practice in the class 45 minutes a day. Also, we got to be careful with grammar, because grammar, we may be pushing things that we don't want to push with when we teach grammar. And you know what I mean. We may be pushing classism, right? We may be pushing a form of imperialism, a form of these people speak this way and these other people speak this way, and we go by those people, right? Then you got another, when it comes to English, like other languages, then you have another problem of, when it comes to what the British do and what the Americans do, which one do you pick? Both are right.
I got you.
The other, another issue that you have, especially when we're talking about academic English, is as you know, we also have style guides. One style guide may say one thing, and another style guide may say do it completely different. And how many style guides do you have out there? We got APA, you got MLA, you got Vancouver, right? You got all these different style guides, Harvard, Chicago, right? So, I know APA like the back of my hand. I used to know MLA because I was an English major, so we did MLA. But when I started, when I got my master's, I was introduced to APA, and that's all I know now is APA. So that's an issue of style, which kind of falls under the grammar category, because sometimes there's some grammar in the style guides. There are grammar considerations, a lot of grammar considerations. So the better thing to do is not teach grammar, just model it. With the understanding that language is dynamic. Language is dynamic, is ever changing. And the rules of grammar is changing. I'm reading a book now by Dr. John Water. And amazing. He's a very smart guy. I think he's out of Harvard. I just previewed the book. I got to finish another book before I actually dived into the book, but I've been reading some of the highlights of the book. And some of his papers, and this guy's just incredibly smart, not just on the language topic. He's almost moving down that road like Chomsky. Start off with language and linguistics and politics and socialism, but very intelligent individual. And one of the points that he's making is stop being a grammar snob. Yeah, it's you use the language that is necessary for the moment. And the great thing about it is I have seen it in action at the university. If you ask any of the students who know English well, who speak English and write it well, and you ask them, how did you learn English? You speak well, you almost at C1 level, or maybe even C2 level in some cases. And each one will tell you, I've never heard a person say, I learned it in school. Every last one was, either I was born and raised in the UK or America or Australia, or it was, I learned it by watching television and movies.
But when you say it would be a fair statement also that if you're teaching language to people who already have a language, and I think we touched upon this last time, there's like that, there's a cross, just a human instinct, if you went back to the older theories, but add to it the fact that there's already a base there, there's a language there. So putting the language together is more of a natural process. It's even more natural now because there's already a language that they're dealing with. And so that's why they can probably pick up on the flow. They need more of the flow, the meaning, the the structure,
Mm.
right, that they get from somebody else. But take a younger, less experienced learner,
Mhm.
and to them, they're going, of course, they're going to question everything. And if they want to be completely natural in the way they speak, it may not come out to be the way that, that we can understand, or the way that other people speak. So, and of course, they will try to emulate elders or people who are older, and then they will try to develop their language that way. But at some point, you'd having some form of understanding of why language is formed. Let's put aside that we want to form language correctly. Let's say we just want to understand why language is formed the way it is and how it's put together. You would need to have some understanding of at least basic grammar. Yeah.
No, no. And the example that you use about about children, young learners, proves it. Who picks up a language quicker, adults or children?
No, of course, children.
Children. You think, are they concerned with the grammatical structure? And then
No.
this goes back to Chomsky, universal grammar. This is what makes Chomsky's universal grammar theory relevant, is that children pick up languages and they're not concerned with grammatical structures. The grammar is pre-wired almost. Those structures and forms are almost pre-wired. We as adults want to hold on to grammatical rules because that's how we have learned to make sense of the world. Right?
But
If I was
yeah.
Go ahead.
But it would also be fair to say that as an adult, I hold on to grammar, because if I have a message I'm trying to get across, whether in my writing or my speech, I understand that the way sentence structures are built can help the listener or the reader on the other side understand the point I'm trying to make. So I'll put my clause at the end of the sentence and I won't end on a preposition. So, there's just these things.
But we're talking about two different things, though.
Okay.
You're talking about refining the language and playing with the language and manipulating in ways to do, these very intricate, nuanced things. And I'm talking about learning the language.
So you're talking more about understanding what the language itself.
I'm talking about actually acquiring a language. You
acquiring
don't
it, not necessarily using it.
No, even using it.
Mhm.
You're talking about using it for these very, I need to convince this person, or I want to impress this person. I want to come across as intelligent. That's something different.
I want to get an idea across. I want this person to understand what I'm trying to talk about, for example.
Yeah.
It's just that.
Yeah, but more than that. You want them, you also want them not to think you're a complete idiot either, because you want your grammar to follow grammatical structure. You don't want to end with a preposition. Yeah.
No, I don't want to end a preposition, because I think that the reason you don't end on prepositions is because you have to complete a thought. That's all. I'm just saying that I mean,
yeah,
the way
it's like a
really,
but so if someone was a professional sent you an email and there were several sentences that ended with prepositions, which is not a grammatical error, by the way. It's perfectly fine to end a sentence with a preposition. That doesn't break the grammatical rule. But, and you're making my point by that, because this whole not ending with a preposition deal, that's not a grammatical rule. It's one of those things where we say don't do it, even though it's not even a rule. It becomes we don't end sentences with prepositions. And it's not even a rule. You can end a sentence with a preposition. If you don't believe me, go to Grammarly. Grammarly will tell you end the sentence with this sentence right here, you need to end with a preposition. Right? Because I do it all the time. I said, well, this is a preposition. I'm going to take
the writing
preposition out. Huh?
We all do it, just not when we write so often. And from my perspective, it's just because I thought it was a grammatical rule. And I thought it probably, maybe it made sense because you had to add, an object afterward that or something to complete your thought, for example. Maybe this helps you to organize yourself.
There are times where ending with a preposition is perfectly fine, and it may even be necessary. Go to Grammar Girl. Grammar Girl talks about this all the time. She talks about this often, and in a sentence with a preposition. We don't like it because, you know, Mrs. Jones from the 4th grade said don't end the sentence with a preposition. So that's one of those things that, and it makes my point about grammar is that we begin to invent things, and sometimes what we invent actually turns into a rule, and that's why language is living, and it's because of things like that, because cultural and political and social things occur that change the language. It's the same reason why bling bling is in the dictionary, right? So a rap slang that is now has made its way to the dictionary. So, but ultimately, yes, we should know grammar. If you're going to be an English teacher, you should know grammar. If you're going to be a consultant, if you're going to be doing writing, and you're going to be, writing journals and writing emails, yes, grammar is important to keep everybody on the same page. I absolutely agree. But to learn a language, you do not need to know the grammar. That comes later. That's when we're talking about doing these high-level manipulations of the language, right? My son is American, only been to America 2 times in his life, and he speaks English, and he never took a grammar class. And he speaks English correctly, grammatically correct. Why? Because his father is an English teacher, right? And he's around his father all the time, speaking to other English people who speak English well. And it's just has rubbed off over time. He's not concerned about, and he doesn't care about the rules of grammar. In fact, he probably will fight you when you start talking about the rules. He does some grammatical mistake. That's another. But for the most part, he understands the rules of grammar well, better than I. Growing up in the States, because I grew up in a place where people didn't care about the grammatical rules of English. And look, I'm an English teacher. I make money. I feed my family, spreading the gospel of English. So we don't need to teach grammar. Now, let me qualify what I'm saying, because I don't want to send the wrong message. Do we teach grammar? Yes, obviously we do. We model the language, and we also teach students different grammatical points. Absolutely. However, we don't dedicate a class to grammar. Like in my university, students take a grammar class, and I yell every year, and I advocate that this class is unnecessary. However, it becomes a political issue, doesn't it? Because the Arabic teachers rely on that class to stay relevant. The Arabic teachers teach grammar. The native speakers teach writing, reading and writing. And that becomes the political structure of the university. So here comes Ray Roberts talking about, hey, don't teach grammar, it's unnecessary. And the Arabic teachers are looking at me like, brother, you're trying to eat. It's our job, right? So now it becomes a political issue, right? So then I go, shut up, Ray, just shut up. This is not about anything other than people keeping their job, right? And that's the problem often with education. Sometimes it's not about how efficiently or effectively we instruct students. It's about the political things that are going on in the background. But we can teach grammar while teaching reading. We can teach grammar while teaching listening. We can teach grammar definitely while teaching writing, right? Um, grammar is something that is perpetually taught from the moment class begins to the end of class, and even when the students outside of class still listening to people speak. So our job is to make grammatical points, for instance. And this is why setting up your program has to be strategic. So if, let's say, you have your English language center, and instead of having a class that deals with, let's say you want to deal with tenses, and you're going to start, with the habitual tense and the past tense. Instead of having a class where you give students worksheet and you stand in front of the board and you're saying, well, this is the present tense and this is the past tense, and the past tense are things that happen in the past, right? And go through all of that. Isn't it much better to do it while you're teaching reading? So, and then now you can break it down into what? What type of reading? This is why themes are important. Looking at yesterday, I remember when, right? So then you read these stories, short stories, right? Novellas, and probably low-level speakers can probably very short stories, poems, right? Narratives. So when you're reading the narrative, and you'll see this when we go back into teaching reading, when you're reading the narrative, you can point out all the sentences in past tense. Because a narrative, everything is going to be in past tense, right? Right? Everything's going to be in past tense. So now you can point out everything in past tense, and you can show them the sentence structure. You can show them the subject verb agreement. Well, we're talking about past tense. You can show them, the sentence structure, how the subject interacts with the verb in the past tense form, right? You can show them the ed. You can show them the irregular verbs, right? And they get to see they get to see many iterations of sentences written in the past tense, and it's authentic because it follows a storyline. Versus give them a worksheet, lecturing for 10 minutes, giving them a worksheet, and there you go. Now use the past tense.
Gotcha.
All right. It's much more effective to have themes, use literature or use whatever, biographies, whatever, that everything is written in the past tense, so they can see many different iterations, and then you can have authentic conversations with them about past tense. Same thing with the future tenses, same thing with all the tenses. They're learning many things at once, because everything kind of goes together. And they're not learning it in relation. Now they're not going, okay, do I use the past tense here? Or do I use the present progressive? Or do I use the habitual, do I need a helping verb, right? Now it's more authentic because it can be related to the story. They can always fall back on that story or a series of stories that you taught, because you're teaching them themes, right? Same thing with the present tense and the future tense and present progressive and continuous, all these tenses. There's 12 tenses. And it becomes very confusing if you try to teach all 12 tenses. Actually, there's only 2 tenses. The past, the present. That's the only 2 tenses. But we have made them, we have created, all these other tenses. So that's kind of just my spill on grammar. I'm anti-grammar. I think a lot of a lot of linguists are anti-grammar in their own way, and they will. And a lot of polyglots will tell you that they don't learn languages based on grammar. In fact, if you talk to Confine, who's a polyglot, very famous polyglot, he would tell you the way he learns a language is by reading, trashy soap operas. That's his thing. So he find the trashiest of trashy stuff, and he gets into it because he likes that type of reading, and that's how he learns the language, not by picking up a grammar book in Spanish or Arabic or whatever. Because all the grammar is going to come through in whatever you read, even if it's trashy, right? So so that's kind of my spill on grammar. So I'm going to ask you, now that we know that Ray hates grammar. Actually, I don't hate grammar. I just don't like it when teachers teach grammar. Even in the schools that I consult, I mandate that there to be no grammar worksheets, mandated, and we go over why, and it always works. So I'm going to ask you the question: how would you define? In fact, let's pull up the first sheet so we can get that first part of that done. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you while I'm pulling it up. You can take a second to think about it. How would you define grammar?
It's to me, it's structure. It's
But do me a favor. Do me a favor.
yes.
Write words or a definition down. I want to. So write it down on a sheet of paper. How you would do. You can either write a series of words, or you can write a solid definition. Either way, I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. All right. So how would you define grammar?
Well, I have certain words that come to mind when I think of grammar, like structure, direction, syntax, template, a template of ideas, rules related to position of or to the relationship between words to form thoughts, putting together ideas to form more complex and meaningful paragraphs, a conversion table of thoughts into a comprehensible form. This is what I think of grammar.
I agree with all those things. I agree with all those things.
That's comforting.
So let's see what
Coming from you, Ray, that's comforting.
what Dave. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I've had English teachers of 20 years that couldn't communicate that. So I mean, bravo. So let's see what Dave says. And notice there's no one solid definition. I always find that interesting. What is grammar? The whole system and structure of a language, and languages in general, usually taken as consisting of syntax and morphology, including inflections, sometimes phonology and semantics, phonology and semantics. All right, and that's from Oxford dictionaries. So you mentioned syntax. Then Lawson Freeman, which is my favorite person in the world when it comes to this stuff, language acquisition. She says, Dr. Lawson Freeman says, language is, grammar is meaning, usage, and form. And I think you hit some points there. Right, can you do me a favor? Right. Take that from that cat, please. I think this cat gonna have to find a new home soon. Chomsky, our homeboy Chomsky, Universal Grammar. Chomsky says grammar is a system of generative rules which are governed by universal grammar parameters. Take the bag from me. Dave says, put it in trash. Dave says grammar is context and codetext. Do you know what codetext? I know you know what context is. Do you know what codetext is?
It has to do with words, putting together words or to like describe meaning to something like that.
Absolutely. It's just the location of words, and the location of words define the meaning. Right. So that's why we teach students to read in context. We teach students to read in context because of the codetext of the words, because the location of words define meaning or create meaning. So that's codetext. The context is the meaning, is the situation that is created because of the codetext. Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Also, Lawson Freeman says that it's a complex adaptive system. I like that word adaptive. That means it's always changing, and it's complex, wherein the rules arise out of context and usage. Hence, Mrs. Smith, you don't end a sentence with a preposition. That's not true, Mrs. Smith. That's true because you want that, but there are situations that arise where you can put a preposition at the end of the sentence. A nonlinear dynamical system. I like that. This is why we don't teach it. That's why we don't teach grammar. What is here it is. What it is not is a series of rules known to the teacher or even the experts. And that's why we don't teach it. Because the reality is, it's so many rules, and you teach this, and I have run into this a lot. You teach a student a rule of grammar, and then 3 weeks later, an exception to that rule arises, and you look like a complete idiot in front of the students, because then you got to go, hey, but this is an exception to the rule, and the students looking at you like, yeah, you taught us the wrong thing, brother, right? So, so what I do now is I tell my students that, don't focus on grammar. Let's focus on getting our point across. All right. And I use an expression that I learned when I first started teaching in August of 2000. We had a guest speaker. It might have been 2001, but it's around when I first started teaching. And we had a guest speaker. And I will never forget, he did two things. He kept on saying during the presentation, if you see a lady with a purple hat, let me know. Wave your hand if you see the lady with the purple hat. And people are going, what is he talking about? And I learned later on why he did that. And then he said, continuously throughout this talk, is the message sent, the message received.
Mm.
The message sent, the message received. And that is how I teach writing, is by starting right there. What that does, what that allows me to do is not, and it starts to program and condition the students to not rely on grammatical structures, but rely on context and cotext, and rely on the intent. And it also allows me to, when I grade papers, to not grade based on grammatical rules, but grade based on coherence and cohesion and conciseness, and ask them based on their topic sentence. Did you prove your topic sentence? Right? What was the message that you were trying to send? And was it received by the audience? Right? So that allows me to work on ground that is not as firm as grammar, but more relatable to the student. Because now I can say, well, tell me exactly what you want to say, right? Don't worry about trying to speak fancy or trying to speak like a native speaker or trying to speak like Shakespeare. Just say what you want to say. And we can work through how to say it together, but get the idea in your mind. It also allows me to focus on the writing process, which many students like to skip. Because I used to skip it also because I thought it was a waste of time. Then I realized it's the writing process is the key to good writing. So when I remove grammar, and when I teach writing, grammar is the last thing I tell students to worry about. Get ideas on paper, organize those ideas. Are those ideas logical? Have you considered those ideas? Do they make sense? Can you express those ideas coherently? Are those ideas connected so you have good cohesion and you're not breaking unity, right? It allows me to talk about the more important things about writing instead of grammar. And then grammar is the very last thing because even in the writing process, grammar is the last thing, right? Mm-hmm. Brainstorm, outline, drafting, revising for ideas, and then the last thing you do is edit for grammatical and mechanical mistakes. Okay. So I think you got that down based on your what happened? Based on your response, I think you understand that well. So my next question to you would be, what does a teacher need to know about grammar? So what do you think so you're hiring someone for your center, your language center. What do they need to know? What does your teacher need? What do your teachers need to know about grammar?
That is nonlinear and dynamic.
Okay. Yeah. But whatever the things that they need to.
Well, I'm based on what our discussion now and on the fact that modeling the language is a lot more important than setting putting up hazard signs all over the place and restricting a person's ability to use their phonetics, their newfound phonetics, or the fact that they're going to copy the language and copy phrases and copy sentences. So now the issue of the precise details of the grammar at least at a certain level, up to a certain level, need not be ingrained and embedded. It may actually be restrictive to their own ability to understand or to learn the language. Because if they're overly concerned about the grammar, then they'll spend more time thinking about that rather than thinking about what the meanings of certain words are, or how words are used, or when they hear them, or the. So I get that. I can see how that can be an issue.
So you're hiring teachers to teach at your center. What do your teachers need to know about grammar?
I at this stage, I wouldn't say they need to know anything about grammar per se. I'd say they need to know how to put together their thoughts and ideas in coherent structure. That's it. The student will model the teacher. That's it.
So, all right, let's look. I would, before we, now your money is on the line here. Do you want them to be able to be aware of grammatical structures and points in the rules? Do they need to be aware of the rules of grammar?
No, we've established that if you have a good speaker, if they're listening to the right speakers, if we're reading the right material, we don't need to worry about how things are put together, because they have a vocabulary and they're sort of shaping it into their thoughts, and they'll always be looking for something that they've already seen. They're not creating at this stage, and they could create by putting together simpler units, in the future. But for now, we're just concerned about getting some of the basics down. So we wouldn't need to know.
So your teacher. No, I'm talking about your teacher. I'm talking about the teacher you're going to hire to teach students. Do they need to know grammar?
Well, if they want to teach more advanced people, if they plan to stay around, I guess they'd have to know something. But then again, it's their approach to grammar that would be more important. And
so, and you say something interesting. You said something interesting. Said something very interesting. They probably would disagree with me, but this is my belief. For younger students, I don't think the teacher needs to be a grammar nerd. They need to know some basic things about grammar, obviously, but they should not be grammar girl, because they're going to confuse the hell out of a student, even if they're natives. They're going to confuse the hell out of a student. But at a higher level, maybe upper middle school, definitely high school, 9, 10, you might want a teacher who is more interested and concerned about grammar, because of what you said when we first started this conversation, right? Being able to manipulate the language to get people to do things. I think in upper middle school, high school, where we need to start learning how to write effectively, and being aware of who you're talking to, and that this person may be concerned about prepositions at the end of sentences, right? Because that's life, isn't it? Right? There's some people who are grammar is language, right? And there's some people who use grammar as a tool to discriminate. There are. So I think at higher levels, we must teach students that these people do exist, and that you do need to write a certain way depending on your audience, right? You need to speak depending on your audience. So you need to have, you do need to be aware of grammatical structures, because you do have people out there that will deny you if you do not follow those grammatical structures.
But you know what I found is, as I grew older and as I started to actually write, I found that it's more of the mega I don't have a term for it. The mega structures of grammar, the larger, how to write a paragraph or a research or how to reference, it was these bigger, I would say more complex, not bigger, but just to say more complex. And then the smaller things. And really, to be honest, why are we discounting the digital revolution? I mean, who actually checks their spelling anymore? Who looks at the sentence? If there's something wrong, Google will somehow, or Word will double click it for you, and you'll go back and it'll give you the option, right? So a
Yeah,
lot
but
of the work that we
even
used
with
to
the
have to
most,
do, we don't do.
even with the most advanced grammar, spell check. Well, spell check is something different. But even with the most grammar software out there, you still have to have a command to select, because, like, for instance, I use Grammarly all the time, and you still need to know grammar. Even though Grammarly will teach you grammar because it's adaptive, so it will teach you grammar based on your writing style, but you still need to have some it it is complex. It is active, and you got to keep going, right? And
I'm losing you, Dave.
complex adaptive is
Ray, I'm losing you. I mean, I can hear you, but it's like it's broken up.
Let me still breaking up. I'm still breaking up.
Okay, you're better now.
Better.
Yeah, let me shut my video. Maybe it'll be better. Maybe it's my side that's the problem. All right, can you hear me?
Is that better?
It's the
Can you hear
last
me?
part of your sentence. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Let me do so I didn't have my mic, my external mic. Let me see.
Okay. You were saying
Better
about
now?
Grammarly. Yeah, much better. You're saying Grammarly will teach you grammar and it's adaptive.
Right. So, but still you need to know some level of grammar, right? You still need to know some level of grammar to make, because often they give they give you choices, and sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes Grammarly is wrong, and these other software is wrong because it is complex, it is adaptive, it is nonlinear and dynamic. So even the softwares, which are excellent, I pay a lot of money for Grammarly, excellent, but sometimes there's a small percentage. There are times where they get certain points wrong. So we got to follow those considerations. But going back to the questions, because our time is almost running short. What do you need to know? Well, here are some things that the teachers need to know. They need to know labels and examples. They need to know how to contextualize. They need to know how to highlight important features of grammar. They need to know the terminology used in textbooks about grammar, right? Gerunds and relative clauses, and you need to know those things, right? They need to know what appropriate language is. So that teachers need to know relative to grammar, right? So now the next question would be, what do students need to know?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on what students need to know?
Initially, they need to know how sentences are put together, or which words follow each other more often, patterns. But then gradually, I would say that they'd have to be able to differentiate, for example, certain parts of speech. for the simple fact of being able to construct and synthesize on their own.
I agree with that. Anything else? All right.
No.
So common forms. I think you mentioned that. Patterns. You mentioned that. Functions. Functions is a big one, right? So a word can have a part of speech, can be a part of speech, but it can also serve many functions. Sentence sequences, you mentioned that. Variations, generalizations, all of you kind of hit on most of these. So these are things that students need to know.
Okay.
All right. So when we come back, and are we going to meet tomorrow? How are we doing this?
How's
I
your
owe
schedule?
you a day. Yeah, I can meet you tomorrow because I owe you a day for this week.
Yeah, okay. I'm good. Same time tomorrow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on common grammar labels and systems. We're going to explore features and functions of language. We're going to develop awareness of language form and how these features convey meaning. We're going to reflect on challenges faced by the learner and develop a sense of how English is constructed and can be described. So that's what we're going to do when we meet tomorrow. All right.
Okay.
And the first unit will be word classes. Unit 1 is word classes. All right. I'm going to make sure you have this in the Google Classroom. So if you want to look over it before tomorrow,
Okay.
make sure that you do your don't forget about your reflection.
Right.
Today's class. And again, I'll put this in the Google Classroom if it's not already there.
Okay.
You have any questions for me?
No, I think you did a great job with all of that. Simply, I didn't just come up with these answers. I also had a sense of a good underlying sense of the flow. So no, I don't have any questions at the moment. I recall
so today
that
was just,
yeah. No, sorry, I was just
No,
going to
go
say I recall that one of the things we talked about last time. Yeah, two things. First of all, we talked about the lesson plan last time, very briefly.
Yeah.
We ran over it. I was wondering whether you may have a good source for that. And number two, I'm writing a paper on facilitation styles. And I know you're well read and all. So I was wondering whether there's anybody that you, when it comes to facilitation styles and methods of facilitation and putting together a good training or something, do you have any a book or something or a site or something that I can look at that will give me some good idea?
I got so much stuff. Where can we start you off at? I'm gonna draw you off the ISPI. These are instructional design. It's a group, a professional group that I'm a part of. There's a lot of stuff on facilitation because these are all instructional designers and human performance guys and women. So let me start you there. So this is based on just strictly on delivering workshops, right? Or trainings. Yeah. Let me start you there. There's probably a lot of good stuff at ISPI in that regard. So I'll start you there. I'll put a link in the Google Classroom for that website. And and then I'll put other things in there also too, because then I gotta try to figure out what book I have. I'm looking at a book right now, actually, on my desk. That would be an excellent book. Let's see. I can see this book right here is really good.
Okay. Who writes that one? Executive coaching.
This is Marshall Goldsmith.
Okay.
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 And here's another good one. So you're up my alley. This is stuff that I read.
All right.
Training
design
basics.
basics. by Saul
So
Carlin. Okay.
there's probably a PDF version of this. It's probably a PDF version because these books are kind of old, so they're probably free on the internet now.
Excellent.
Especially this one, because this is ASTD, which is they're out in Northern Virginia, and they put a lot of their stuff for free online once it goes out of circulation. So this is probably definitely a PDF somewhere.
Okay,
Right.
excellent. Okay, great. I'll look forward to that and the
As far
grammar
as
book.
as far as the lesson planning, it's tons of stuff out there. And I'll put some websites on that for you also.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rick. I
No
appreciate it.
worries. All right. We'll see
Okay,
you tomorrow at
well,
6 o'clock.
okay. What should I should I read ahead for? So we're doing word classes tomorrow. So I'll look into that.
Yeah, look at the word classes unit,
Okay.
and we'll be ahead. You can be ahead of the game. All right.
All right, man. All right.
All right. We'll see you tomorrow. All right.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Good evening.